I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't have all the right words. I'm tired. I haven't slept. I hardly eat. I'm just exhausted. I feel like I'm in a nightmare.
That's Tariah Tucker. She's the younger sister of Star Tucker. Her family says the 30-year-old was an active member of the Air Force and a Florida A&M alum. They say she also just started a relationship with Charles Carson Dowdy.
He seemed sweet. He seemed innocent. He seemed charming.
Thursday night, deputies were called to the parking lot of this apartment complex on Baldridge Drive. Sheriff Chip Simmons says they were responding to a call for shots fired and found Tucker in the parking lot.
The investigation revealed that the victim's boyfriend had fired about 15 to 16 shots and struck her 7 times at least, and then used her car to drive over her.
Tucker later died at the hospital. Her family later learning Carson Dowdy was arrested and charged
on an ordinary Thursday night in Escambia County, Florida. The kind of night when families settle in, when porch lights glow softly against the quiet breeze. Something unthinkable happened in the parking lot of a modest apartment complex on 9 Mile Road. A woman lay on the ground beside her own Jeep Cherokee, motionless, silent, and moments away from being discovered by neighbors who would never forget what they saw. That woman was 30-year-old Star Tucker, a mother, a veteran, a nurse, and the kind of person whose smile could calm an entire room. A woman whose strength was shaped by service in the United States Air Force, whose compassion was shaped by every patient she cared for, whose heart was shaped by the son she loved more than anything in this world. But on January 2nd, 2025, her life was not taken quietly. It wasn't taken gently. It was taken with a level of violence so shocking that even seasoned investigators struggled to process what they were seeing. Because this wasn't a case of one tragic moment. No, what happened to Star was a storm, sudden, relentless, and fueled by a man she cared about. Before the world knew her name, before headlines began to circulate, before federal agents arrived and the story unraveled, Star was simply trying to navigate a relationship she believed was safe. A man she thought she understood. A man who never should have been capable of such harm. The hours before her death were ordinary, routine, familiar. Star had been home, likely preparing for the weekend, thinking about work, thinking about her family, thinking about her son, a little boy who would soon lose the most important person in his life. But as night settled in, so did danger. Somewhere between a conversation, an argument, or a moment that shifted too quickly, Star found herself facing a form of rage no one could have predicted. A rage that did not stop at the first shot, or the second, or the seventh. And when the gunfire fell silent, the story did not end. The person responsible allegedly climbed into Star's own vehicle, her Jeep, and did something so devastating, so unimaginable, that investigators described the scene as beyond tragic. By the time deputies arrived, the parking lot had turned into a crime scene that felt frozen in time. A moment of horror suspended under the harsh glow of streetlights. A moment where the life of a woman who had survived military training, who had devoted herself to helping others, who had just celebrated Christmas with her family, was gone. And as neighbors gathered at their windows, as officers tried to piece together the chaos, as investigators searched for the suspect, now fleeing across state lines, one question hung in the air. How does love turn into something like this? Tonight, we're going to walk through the final hours of Star Tucker's life. We will follow the investigation that crossed state borders. We will hear the words that led deputies straight to the man responsible. And we will honor who Star truly was, far beyond the tragedy that took her life. Because her story isn't just heartbreaking. It's a warning, a mirror, a reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come from the people we trust. This is the story of Star Tucker, and what happened to her will stay with you long after this video ends. Welcome to Lat True Crime Stories. I am your host. Today we are breaking down one of the most twisted cases you've ever seen. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and leave your comment to tell us where you're watching from. Let's build this community together. Now let's get into it. Before the world heard her name in news reports, before federal agents, sheriffs, and investigators pieced together the final hours of her life, Star Tucker was simply a woman in the middle of building something beautiful. She was 30 years old, with a whole constellation of responsibilities, dreams, and victories behind her. People who loved her never described her in halves. They didn't call her just a mother, or just a nurse, or just a veteran. No, Star was the kind of woman who lived in full measure, and you felt that the moment she entered a room. She served her country in the Air Force, tending to people during some of their hardest moments. She earned a nursing degree at Florida A&M University, pushing through the long nights, the exhaustion, and the pressure. And even with all of that, she still made time for the people she loved, especially her family, especially her child. To them, she was a quiet light, a steady presence, someone who could make you smile even when her own day had been heavy. She had a way of listening without judgment, of comforting without making a scene, of offering strength without needing it back. Her sister would later say that Star had the softest heart in the family. But soft didn't mean weak, not for Star. She carried the kind of strength that didn't need to shout to be real. That strength was what guided her through life, through service, through studies, through motherhood, but it also guided her through companionship. Love, after all, is something almost everyone reaches for, even the strongest among us. Star had been dating a man named Charles Carson Dowdy. On the surface, he seemed like someone who wanted stability, someone who understood her responsibilities and the weight she carried. No one in her closest circle describes the early days of their relationship as alarming. No red flags, no obvious dangers, no clear storm on the horizon. To Star, it may have felt like the start of something supportive, someone who understood her long shifts, someone who could keep her company in quiet evenings, someone who knew how to talk softly after long days. Those early details matter because they show just how normal everything looked. These were not the beginnings of a terrifying story. They were the beginnings of an ordinary one.
Man arrested for murder. He's accused of killing a woman in Escambia County, Florida last night at an apartment complex in Ferry Pass.
And listen to this. She was shot, then run over, and deputies tell WKRG News 5's Alexa Daly her boyfriend is responsible.
A brutal killing at the crossings on Baldridge Drive Thursday night.
The victim was shot at least 7 times by her boyfriend and then run over at least twice.
The sheriff's office says the victim, identified by family as 30-year-old Star Michael Latrice Tucker, was transported to a local hospital where she died. Investigators say the suspect, 30-year-old Charles Jerome Carson Dowdy, left the scene in the victim's Jeep Cherokee.
We contacted the Alabama authorities and they did find that Jeep Cherokee with a flat tire on the interstate just inside the Alabama line.
Carson Dowdy was taken into custody by Spanish Fort Police and booked into the Baldwin County Jail just before 1 a.m. Friday. He will be extradited to Escambia County, Florida.
You can't just escape one jurisdiction and think you're going to get away. I think that the speed at which we developed the information was important, and obviously the partnerships and relationships that we've built, the communication and cooperation with other agencies was very important.
Family members described Tucker as a bright light, a phenomenal mother, and someone who was selfless and determined. They say they hope justice is served. The sheriff says Carson Dowdy faces a second-degree murder charge.
He didn't give off he could do something like this, but you never know until it's too late. I don't understand why he did what he did, because he could have just left. I just want justice as of now, and I won't stop until I get it.
Looking at Carson Dowdy's criminal history, he was arrested in Mobile in 2023 as a fugitive.
Star's home reflected her personality, neat, warm, and filled with subtle touches that reminded you of her character. A pair of nursing textbooks stacked on a table, a photo frame placed carefully near the entryway, a few decorations she had picked for no other reason than they made her smile. You could tell she took pride in her environment. Her days were predictable in the best way. Caring for her child, going to work, checking in with her sister, making plans for the next step in her nursing career, setting goals for a future she believed she was walking confidently toward. If she had worries, she didn't share them widely. If something troubled her, she held it quietly, maybe too quietly. Friends would later say she wasn't the type to make noise about her pain. She believed in fixing things gently, in listening, in giving chances. She believed in people, sometimes more than they believed in themselves. A heart like that can make a person unforgettable. It can also make them vulnerable in ways they never expect. In the days leading up to the tragedy, nothing outwardly signaled what was about to unfold. She wasn't posting messages of fear. She wasn't warning friends that something was wrong. She wasn't withdrawing from the people she loved. If anything, she was engaged, laughing, planning living. And that's what makes her story so heartbreaking. The only clues to what may have been happening existed behind closed doors, in moments she didn't speak about, in private conversations that no one else heard, in subtle shifts in a relationship that other people couldn't see from the outside. Love, even troubled love, is complicated like that. You don't always know when it's shifting. You don't always see the storm building. Sometimes you only recognize the danger when it's too late. On January 2nd, as the sun dropped behind the apartment buildings and the parking lot lights flickered on one by one, the world outside her home looked quiet, almost peaceful. Her neighbors settling in for the night. Cars humming past the entrance to the complex. A calm, ordinary evening. Inside her world, though, the night was beginning to move towards something irreversible. For Star, this evening was supposed to be like any other. A moment to unwind, a moment to catch her breath, a moment to reset after a long day. But somewhere in those hours, something shifted. Something she could not stop. Something she likely didn't see coming until the moment fear made itself undeniable. It was a moment that would forever change the shape of her family, her community, and the life of her child. A woman who had done everything right, who built a life with love and effort, who deserved decades more of peace, standing unknowingly at the edge of a night that would soon become a tragedy none of us can forget. The hours following the tragedy felt unreal for everyone connected to Star. It was as if time itself slowed down, refusing to move forward until the truth came into full focus. At the Crossings apartment complex, deputies worked under the hum of floodlights, their radios crackling softly as investigators paced the scene, searching for answers in the quiet aftermath of chaos. Neighbors stood outside their doors, wrapped in blankets, arms crossed tightly as though trying to hold themselves together. Some whispered prayers. Others cried silently. All of them asked the same question. How did this happen to her? Investigators quickly realized this wasn't a random act, and it wasn't the kind of violence that comes without warning. This was personal, emotional, driven by someone who knew her. As deputies cordoned off the area, witnesses shared what they saw. Flashes of movement, the sound of Star's voice moments before everything changed, and the unmistakable presence of someone she trusted. Piece by piece, those voices created a timeline that pointed directly toward the man she had been dating, Charles Carson Dowdy. Back at the sheriff's office, detectives were already pulling his information, searching for recent calls, messages, anything that could explain what led to the horrifying events in the parking lot. What they uncovered was troubling, a pattern of behavior that hinted at jealousy, emotional imbalance, and sudden mood shifts that Star had never shared publicly. While the investigation tightened around him, Carson Dowdy was on the move. He left the apartment complex immediately after the incident, crossing state lines, heading toward Alabama. His departure wasn't subtle. It wasn't calculated. It was desperate, the kind of frantic flight that only amplifies suspicion. Meanwhile, word spread through Star's family, and distance didn't soften the blow. Her sister, Raya, received the call no one ever wants to hear. For several moments, she couldn't process the words. It felt like someone was speaking through water, everything muffled, everything unreal. Her knees gave way before her mind fully understood. The world around her blurred. Star wasn't just her sister. She was her anchor, her confidant, her joy, the one who always showed up, always encouraged, always carried herself with a light that didn't dim easily. Losing her felt impossible. As investigators continued their work, an unexpected lead emerged. A former coworker of Carson Dowdy contacted authorities, shaken, frightened, and holding information that would change the direction of the case. He explained that Carson Dowdy had called him shortly after the incident. The man's voice was uneven, emotional, and deeply alarming. He spoke in a way that suggested a level of guilt, confusion, and fear. That call, recorded in police documents, painted a picture of a man spiraling, and it became the turning point. Deputies immediately tracked Carson Dowdy to Spanish Fort, Alabama, locating him before he had the chance to disappear entirely. His arrest was swift, carried out with caution, and brought a wave of relief through both states. But for Starr's family, the relief was only partial. An arrest doesn't erase a loss. It only opens the door to answers and questions far more painful. Back in Florida, detectives began to reconstruct the moments leading up to the tragedy. They searched Starr's phone, looking for signs of distress, fear, or conflict. They combed through text messages, hoping she might have confided in someone about tension in the relationship. But instead, what they found was heartbreaking. Starr had been living her normal life. She had been planning her next steps. She had been focused on raising her child, building her career, and moving toward stability. There was no sign that she expected any kind of danger. Investigators interviewed friends and family members, trying to see the relationship through the eyes of those closest to her. Many were shocked. Some said they had never met Carson Dowdy themselves. Others explained they had barely heard his name. Starr had always been selective with who she let into her personal life, never wanting to burden people with her struggles. That silence made the tragedy even harder to grasp, because no one saw this coming, not even her. As the picture came together, the district attorney prepared serious charges. The federal government stepped in as well, recognizing that the case crossed state lines and involved severe domestic violence. Multiple agencies collaborated: the ATF, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and local investigators, each one determined to bring clarity to what had happened and ensure accountability. Meanwhile, Starr's family faced a different kind of conflict, the emotional storm that comes after an unimaginable loss. Anger, confusion, fear, denial, and above all, a devastating sense of why. A question no investigation could ever fully answer. Starr's young son was told his mother wasn't coming home. That moment alone shattered hearts. Her family grappled with how to explain something so heavy, so unfair. They wondered how they would protect his memories of her, how they would help him understand who she was: a veteran, a nurse, a woman who served her country, her community, and her family with love. But even in the middle of grief, the family found strength. Friends organized vigils. Relatives posted photos and videos celebrating Starr's life. Her face, bright, joyful, full of promise, began circulating widely online. People who had never met her spoke her name and shared her story. And slowly, a community began to form around her memory. The conflict at the center of the investigation wasn't just about uncovering what happened. It was about confronting a larger truth: that even the strongest, most accomplished, most loving individuals can fall victim to a sudden act of domestic violence, and that danger often hides behind silence. By the time the case reached the federal courthouse, the evidence was overwhelming. But justice was still a long process, one that demanded patience and resilience from Starr's family. As they faced hearings, statements, and legal complexities, one thing became clear: the world would not forget Starr Tucker. Her story was not going to be another tragedy lost in the noise of news cycles. Her name would be spoken, her life would be honored, and her story would become a reminder, a powerful call for awareness, accountability, and change. The quiet courtroom felt worlds away from the chaos of the night that took Starr Tucker's life. No sirens, no frantic movements, no confusion, only a heavy silence that wrapped around the room like a blanket no one could escape. Rows of benches filled slowly each morning. Starr's family seated together, hands clasped, leaning into one another for strength. Investigators who had worked the case quietly took their places. Journalists whispered to themselves as cameras clicked outside the doors. Every time the man accused of taking Starr's life was led into the room, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a tightening of breath, a stillness settling into the air. Each appearance was a reminder of everything that had been lost, everything that could never be restored. But justice, even when slow, has a way of moving with purpose. In the months after the incident, layers of evidence began to come together: calls, witness accounts, surveillance footage, digital trails, and the long, painstaking investigative work of multiple law enforcement agencies. What seemed at first like an act of sudden violence had deeper roots. There were signs of escalating conflict, moments that seemed small on their own but, when pieced together, told a larger, heartbreaking story. Prosecutors began laying out the timeline. the calls he made, the places he went afterward, the things he said to others in the hours following the incident. Nothing sensationalized, just facts. And sometimes the simplest facts, stated plainly, are the ones that hurt the most. For Star's family, sitting in that courtroom was like reliving the night over and over. But they stayed. Every day, every hearing, every motion. They stayed because Star couldn't. They stayed because someone had to speak for her, even if only by being present. Her sister, Raya, became a quiet pillar throughout the process. She didn't raise her voice or collapse under the weight of it. She showed up, morning after morning, offering strength to others, even as she carried her own grief. In interviews outside the courthouse, she spoke with warmth and dignity, reminding the world that Star was so much more than the tragedy surrounding her death. She was a mother, a veteran, a nurse, a woman who lived with purpose and compassion. As the truth unfolded, the emotional impact spread far beyond her family. Friends who had grown up with her came forward. Former co-workers from the medical field wrote letters. Members of her Air Force unit contacted the family to share their memories of Star, how she encouraged others, how she worked with patience and dedication, how she showed up for people whether she knew them well or not. Inside the courtroom, the most haunting moments were the quiet ones, when a family photo of Star was shown, when a recording of her laughter was played, when her young son's future was mentioned. These weren't dramatic revelations. They were reminders of the life she had built, the life she deserved to continue living. And then came the turning point, the moment the judge read the charges. Each one felt like a marker, a declaration that what happened to Star mattered deeply, that her life was seen, that the violence inflicted on her was not something that would be brushed aside. The courtroom sat still as the judge outlined the seriousness of the case. There were no outbursts, no dramatic scenes, just the quiet breathing of a family bracing itself for a step toward justice. The man accused would continue facing severe consequences, both state and federal, and the road ahead would be long. But for the first time since the night Star lost her life, her family felt a shift. Not closure, grief doesn't offer that, but movement, recognition, a sense that justice was finally, slowly, beginning to speak. Outside, cameras captured the family walking down the courthouse steps. Reporters asked questions, but Raya didn't respond at first. She stood still, gathering herself. Then she spoke in a soft, steady voice. "We're here because Star deserves justice, and we won't stop until she has it." Her words traveled far, across news broadcasts, across social media, across communities who saw in Star's story a reflection of someone they loved, someone they lost, someone they feared for. In the weeks that followed, Star's memory became a source of unity. Candlelight vigils were held in her honor. Friends shared photos and stories online, using her name to raise awareness about the warning signs of relational conflict. Mental health advocates spoke up. Domestic violence organizations shared resources. Even strangers, moved by her story, sent messages of support and condolences to the family. Star's life was no longer defined solely by tragedy. It became a call to speak up, a call to help others, a call to protect the vulnerable, a call to show love more openly and to take fear more seriously. Her legacy, in this way, became larger than the circumstances of her passing. And now, as we share her story with you, that legacy grows a little more. If you are watching this, take a moment to honor Star Tucker, her laughter, her kindness, her service, her love for her son, her dreams, her dedication. Her life meant something. Her story matters. If you want more people to know who she truly was, not just the tragedy attached to her name, please share this video. It helps her memory reach more people, and it raises awareness in ways that could protect someone else. If you believe every victim of domestic harm deserves justice, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that needs to be told. And if you or someone you know ever feels unsafe, please reach out to a trusted adult or authority figure. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. For Star, for her family, for everyone who still needs their story heard.